Good evening.
Ah, Mr. McMeekin.
Yes, good evening, sir. I'm here.
You made it. Excellent.
Yeah. Oh,
Having a fun day recording stuff, were you?
it hasn't quite gone according to plan. So the materials, there's a few issues with images. So I've had to be constantly changing the materials so that I have a matching image. But the image keeps getting changed. So,
You've always
but
had an image problem.
remember, say no.
Okay, yep. Well, before we start, you want to give your little course a plug?
Yep. Sure.
Dr. McMeekin is running our iOS development course, also on edX, so you can say a quick couple of words before we get started.
Yes. Yeah. My apologies for running a couple of minutes late in there. So we're running another MOOC separate from the IoT, which is an introduction to development Swift and building iOS application. It's for the absolute beginner and for the seasoned veteran. Hopefully, it's covering a whole variety of things. There's three courses in the MOOC. The first two, background and introduction and the basic skills of developing app. And then the third course is a capstone where we'll be going through the whole development life cycle and walking you through and having people build their own apps individually and also within teams. So that's the iOS course that we're running on edX.
Okay, thanks, David. I don't think you got a chance to introduce your area of expertise either, although it should be reasonably obvious that you're an iOS guy, but it might be worthwhile just mentioning your work in spatial sciences, GIS, location-based services, etc.
Yep. So my the area that I work in, I'm background of a computer scientist and a software engineer. So, and my area nowadays that I work in is in the spatial sciences area. So that's the location-based information and processing anything to do with location and to big data science around location. And particularly, we're doing a lot of work with of semantic technologies and being able to process and infer new knowledge. And I do a whole lot with Python programming and scripting and that kind of a background. So that's where I lie these days.
All right, so questions on that sort of area, particularly the programming and big data. There's both Valerie and David to help you out with those ones. Okay, so we'll make a bit of a start. Good evening and welcome to Seminar 3 of the IoT MicroMasters Capstone project. We hope you're enjoying these. Just a reminder again, all of these meetings will be recorded and posted on YouTube. You can get the link from edX. Tonight we're going to run through the requirements for the next couple of weeks. There's a that are due fairly soon, so we'll just quickly run through those. It's now a good time. If anyone hasn't received an answer to their emails that they've sent us, please put your hand up and we'll check to see what's happened. As I've said before, normally we do try to get an answer to you within 2 working days, as early as possible, but occasionally we do miss them. So if you haven't had an answer within 2 working days, resend your email. It may have been buried in the deluge that we do get. Okay, so if anyone hasn't got an email reply. Last week I asked if you could think of a name for your device or solution. If you have and you think it's worth sharing, which I'm sure it will be, please just put it in the comments. We've got an idea of how you're giving some personality and some personalisation to your idea. Video presentations, they're due for submission very soon. The Tuesday the 20th, I think. So make sure that you've got those done.
Yeah, Tuesday, Wednesday the 20th, 0900
Tuesday.
UTC, GMT.
Right. So we're working on different days.
Well, I suppose it would be Tuesday in certain time zones, yes, but Wednesday 0900 in UTC.
Yeah. Okay. Attention to Josh. He knows the details. He's the expert in that area. Okay. So make sure that you've got that ready to go. If you've got any questions on it after that, we've gone through a few things this evening. Good time to check with us. Okay, so we've all submitted our canvanisers. Most have been marked. There's a couple of intellectually sensitive ones that we can't really share that we'll be marking ourselves. We'll get those results out to you as soon as we possibly can. They were generally really, really good. There was a great deal of effort put into these. That's reflected in the results. The average was 18.6 out of 20, so good effort on everyone's behalf there. If you've got any questions or you think you didn't do as well as you would have liked, let us know and we can give you some further feedback on what we think could have been improved on the Canvanizer. I'll mention the Canvanizer several times again tonight because it's a really good tool for completing the rest of the assessment that we have to do later on. Okay, so this fortnight, continue to use your team as a sounding board for developing the ideas. We've asked some people to move into other groups where there's too few members in these groups. That's only so that you've got other people to talk to. It doesn't mean your idea is no good or not popular or anything like that. It's just that the purpose of the teams is to have people to discuss your prototype with. So make use of that. It's really quite handy. We've got a couple of the videos up for you to watch. Again, these are to support how you're developing your plan. So please make sure you have a look at those, the funding and planning videos, business planning, finance and costing. And most importantly, you should be preparing your costing report, which is due in another couple of weeks. And that's what we will really be talking about tonight before we open it up for discussion. So the costing report is worth 15% of your overall mark. It's intended at this point only for yourself and the instructors, advisors in this course. If you decide to capitalise on it, your intended audience will actually broaden to many other people, so you'll have to look at reworking it. People, finances, venture capitalists, if you're courageous enough to go with them, would want something slightly different, but it does make a good basis. The mark of that 15% is broken down into 25% for your industry analysis. And this is really knowing what the industry needs. What is the potential of that particular industry? Where's that industry heading? What problems in that industry are you trying to solve? Competitor analysis is critically important. You need to know who you're going to be competing against. And we've talked a little bit about this before, and I'll mention it later as well, but knowing how your competitors have got their market share, what reputation they have, what market penetration they have is critically important to looking at your own success, and I'll go into a bit more detail on that shortly. The products and services is generally your idea, so what is your solving and how are you going about that. This can be almost taken directly from the Canvanizer. You've already gone and looked at what problem you're attempting to solve, what are the main features of the product you're proposing. So you can use that as a basis for describing the products or services. Having a really good definition of the problem you're trying to solve, so expanding out that Canvanizer brief is critically important, and that's why we've weighted it fairly heavily at 30%. So make sure you put some extra effort into that area, looking at the problem solution. You'll need to work out a pricing strategy. This is critically important as well, but it's a fairly simple exercise to do. Again, I'll mention a bit more on this shortly, but the pricing strategy is another category that you should be writing on. And finally, we want you to do a SWOT analysis. So this is the analysis of the strengths and weaknesses, basically, of the design that you've come up with, and I'll show you that as well. Okay, so The purpose of this is to consolidate your own ideas. It really is mostly for your use. We'll be looking at these and we'll provide you with some feedback on what's good and what could be improved upon. So it really is there to help you build around the concept that you've come up with. You'll have to make a few key decisions before you can complete the plan, such as determining your business structure and the demand that exists for the product service. There's some really good places to find information like this. There's government statistics you can get. We've got a link in the document we're providing on this report that you need to write for IBIS World, and that is a good business analytics tool. You can approach industry associations, other publications, but probably the best place to start is a straightforward Google search. Go and look for things or areas that are closely aligned to the product you're thinking of. Pick out particular keywords to refine that search. Some of the really good places to go after you've got the keywords and know what terms will extract the most relevant information for you is the patent offices. I've got a couple of links up there. There's the IP Australia one. That'll give you a good idea of Australian patents, which are fairly comprehensive. And this is usually freely available to anyone who wants to have a look. And it will give you a very good idea of the state of the art, what people are up to, what they've proposed. Importantly, what intellectual property is protected, because you need to be aware that you're not copying someone else without their permission. And they are very detailed, so you can get some very good ideas from there as well. The Google patents is not too bad either, and you can have a look there. I think that covers that bit. So let's look at the document that we're uploading. There's a PDF document that I'll open up and show you after we've finished here. And you can either fill this in if you wish. It is intended only as a guide. If you want to do it differently, if there's something you feel you could express better in your own format, feel free to do so. However, the template is there to give you a guide of the sort of things we're looking for. And if we go back to this bit, looking at the breakdown of the marks, that is the priority we think is critical to the success of your market research and costing plan. So you should have the bulk of the information and the detail weighted according to this breakdown here. So if we look at the first bit, the industry analysis, there's lots of things you should be considering. There's the political situation. There's quite a few things that in the political realm that could affect your project. If you're working in industry that's highly regulated, such as medical systems or health systems, then there's a very, very long and involved process to get things approved to be used in that field. Telecoms is another one that has a great deal of impact. There's also local things. For example, if you were developing a tourist application for Sri Lanka during the Civil War, I'm not sure if the law is still in place, but still makes a good example. You were barred by law to show any pictures or images of government buildings. So you would have to make sure that wherever you're showing a tourist attraction, that your images don't include images of public buildings. And you need to be aware of this, otherwise you're breaking local laws and end up in a lot of trouble. There's the issues of political stability. You know, is it a market that you really want to invest time and money in if it's politically unstable, and other aspects. One of the things in the political and economic is the local regulations on, say, taxation. Australia recently created a law, and I should have looked it up, but I forgot, is termed either the Amazon or Netflix taxation law. And it requires all people supplying goods bought online to pay Australian sales tax, you know, the GST. This imposes a fairly hefty burden on the supplier into that market, into the Australian market, in that you become a tax collector for the Australian government. So you have to allow a capture of 10% of the retail price of the product, put that money aside and pay it to the Australian government on a regular basis. That may be something that you consider not worth your time to enter into that particular market. And most countries have similar situations with sales tax or other requirements to do business in that country. There's the social factors and cultural factors. Is there a population growth? Is there trends in behaviour? Is there something in the culture that would make your product less favoured, let's say, depending on how the culture approaches that product. So a little bit of cultural sensitivity is important, and also on the social, we'll harp back to the section on privacy in the internet. Different countries will have different privacy laws, so we'll have different levels of security on the information that you're collecting. And it's absolutely imperative that you're aware of those privacy considerations if you are utilising or storing any information from your customer base. Technology, this is a big one for us. What are some of the technological factors that will affect your business? Internets are getting faster, except in Australia where we've got the NBN. A few problems with our local network. Is the technology changing the way businesses are developing? We all know what happened to the recorded music industry, and that had a big impact on traditional music distribution. So we need to know what's emerging, not what is happening right now. Look what's happening within the lifespan of your product. So if you think your product's going to last 10 years in the market, you're going to be producing it, same product or updated product for the next 10 years, you have to be very aware of how things are changing in that technology that you're using. A good example of that would be the move from 3G, 4G to 5G telephone networks. Is your product going to move with that, or is it going to lag behind and perhaps get superseded? And then there's the industry, current and future trends of the industry. There could be barriers, for instance, in coal mining. If you're developing a system to assist in coal mining, that's tending to go out of favour because of the effects of global warming. So you might want to be looking at how you could change your product to focus away from a particular industry to another one so that your same product has a longer life. Moving on, we need to go to the competitor analysis, and this, as I said, is critically important. Knowing what you're up against is crucial. How strong are they? Can they temporarily price you out of the market with loss leaders? And we've seen very good examples of this in the technology field. Microsoft didn't like competition for its web browser, so it started giving away Internet Explorer for nothing. Because they had income streams coming from other areas, not making a profit on Internet Explorer didn't cause them any pain, but to people like Netscape, it basically killed off their business. So if you're going up against a really, really large company or a well-established company, you need to be aware that they can just lose money for a long period of time, generally a longer period of time than you can, and get rid of you that way, or just buy you out. But usually buyouts are a good thing. You get your money back pretty quick. You also have to be well aware of things like brand loyalty. Apple is a great example of that. People are very, very keen on Apple. Does it mean they have the better product? Not necessarily. If we look at the iPhones, they're a very nice telephone. They're nice and easy to use, but they have huge brand loyalty. The newer companies like Oppo, Samsung, LG are probably bringing out better products as far as the technological features go within those phones. But Apple still has that strong brand loyalty, and it's very, very difficult to break into that. You have to do something that's very, very different. So brand loyalty is another very important thing to be aware of. Excuse me. Knowing when they're established, so how long have they been in the market? Again, that comes back in part to reputation. And how much of the market do they actually control? If they control to be considered the de facto standard, it's going to be very, very difficult to break into that market. And you're going to have something that is significantly different or cheaper or better than the existing market, which is your aim anyway. You'd really want to be able to do that. And that's the value to customers as well, making something unique. All right, so look at their strengths, look at their weaknesses. In Apple, probably, if you look at their strengths, it's a brand loyalty and their reputation for building quality products. Their weaknesses are probably they're a little bit behind on the technology aspect. So they don't have the best features or the latest features, and they do make a few little mistakes on the technology as well, such as getting rid of all of the ports on their laptops, which is really, really annoying. Okay, so that is the next section that we need to cover. And then there is the critical, but we haven't put too much emphasis on this because it's fairly straightforward, issue of the costing plan and knowing how to cost it. I think we went through a little bit in this group on different types of strategies that you have. The two most pressing ones, I would think, are whether you're doing it for maximising profit or whether you're doing it to solve some social problem. So your pricing would be slightly different in those cases. Going back again to the bit I mentioned about how much of your research and development costs do you want to recover. If it's a purely profit-driven exercise, and there's nothing wrong with that, then you would want to recover all of your investment in time, in our case, this course, the time you've spent developing it, put a value on that and make sure that you're recovering it. I found a very good and short web page on pricing strategies, and the link is there. I think Josh was going to pop it up on edX somewhere in the discussions, and it does give a very thorough yet brief explanation of different pricing strategies, and that's just a graphic from their website. So again, it's very simple to come up with your pricing strategy, looking at your competitors' prices, looking at the additional benefits of your device, and knowing whether you're maximising profit or whether you're trying to get this to a certain market in an affordable manner. Okay, so have a look at that brief web page, and that will help you out with your pricing strategy. The final thing we will have you do on the report is a SWOT analysis, and these are crucially important for any investor. They will want to see that you've looked at a SWOT analysis. Its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Now, unfortunately, I forgot to fix the graphic here, but it's there in enough detail. And it's just a list of all of the things that fit into those four categories. This is good for framing your thought pattern to suit what is the opportunity. So what is the good stuff that's going to happen? What are my strengths in this area? And we have the negative side as well, and you can balance these out. This allows you at a later point to look at your risk analysis and decide, is it worth continuing? If it is worth continuing, what are the risks? How do I minimize these risks? My dog just started barking. Sorry about that. So how to minimize those risks so that they have the least chance of impacting on you. All right, so that's a brief rundown of the report that we're expecting to get in a couple of weeks' time. The due date is up on edX. If we have any questions on that report, please let us know. But as I've said before, we really do want you to run these discussions as a discussion. We want to know what you're up to. If you're having any issues, now's a great time to raise them. They can be technical issues, they can be issues on when things are due, whatever you like. But we do want you to lead these discussions. So if you have questions now, please either raise your hand in, what's it called again? Cisco thing, WebEx. It must be late at night. It's been a long day. Raise your hand in WebEx or type your question into the comments field. And I'll just go and look for that PDF while we're waiting for people to talk.
All right, so yeah, any raised hands, I'll bring that up. But I just wanted to mention, because after the last WebEx there was some confusion, the slides that Ian just showed are for the next assessment. They're not to do with the video, not directly related to the video, which is in just under 6 days from now. The following assessment is going to be 2 weeks after that due date. Some people in this morning's one were mixed up between the two. So hopefully that's clear.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I've just put the PDF up. You can see that there, Josh?
Yes.
Yep. So as I said, this is just a framework to give you an idea of how to approach the problem. You could use this if you like. If you want to do something completely different, please go ahead, but just make sure that you cover those major points that we have the marking rubric on. You can do it as a Word document, or we can just type away in each of the fields, and that will be able to be submitted through edX for us to actually look at. The advisors will be marking all of these and hopefully give you a little bit of feedback on how you went. Okay, have we got any questions so far?
Not yet, no. Anyone like to raise their hand or otherwise type in the chat window? Oh, Sivesh has something to mention.
Yeah, just wanted to repeat what I mentioned this morning as well, because I see a couple of the names who I received an email from. So we received a couple of emails kind of concerned with, since they had to mark the other canonizers, concerns about their idea not being unique or other people having the same sort of ideas. So this is something that we kept saying. Don't get discouraged by just because someone has a similar idea. What's going to make your idea unique is the way you're implementing it and how you're setting up, let's say, your data capture process, how you're setting up your communication between your network, and how you're using your cloud. That's going to make it unique and interesting. And realistically, we can't expect every single idea that would come out from a course like this to be unique, because that's really not realistic. So just want to put your mind at ease that don't worry. If you find similar ideas, it means that your idea is going to be.
That's a good point. And it really doesn't matter what your idea is, because this is a learning process, we hope. And it's understanding how the process works to develop a new product in the IoT field. Really trying to give people from different backgrounds an understanding of how to deal with people involved in the new product cycle. So if you're a really, really technical person, quite often you'll find it difficult to speak to the business people. You won't understand their way of thought. You won't understand what they're actually after. So we have tried to include enough on the business planning and the finance side that you will have a sufficient idea to be able to communicate correctly in the right terms to people who are more business marketing orientated. And it works the other way around too. So if you're not a technical person, we're hoping that this course, through the design process we're going through, will allow you to be able to specify correctly and succinctly to the technical people, the programmers and the electrical engineers, what it is you're asking them to be able to build for you. And you'll know whether it's realistic or not. You'll know 100,000 lines of code on an Arduino because you tried to do that earlier on in one of the simulators. You'll know what rates you can read sensors at because you've tried it in your prototype. So it really is the idea that you try and work through the system or the process of developing a new product using your speciality, be that business, be that in the industry that you're involved in, or as a technical electronics computer type person. And that's really what we're aiming to do. And it's great that we've got such a wide variety of people in the course too. And that leads to some, hopefully, some very interesting discussions on the discussion board. And
Harold has a question regarding the video. May it include presentation slides? I'd say it's certainly very welcome.
Yes, the video can be produced in any manner you like. It can be you just talking over some slides you're presenting. It could be you in front of a whiteboard. It could be you with how far you've got with your prototype, showing what it can and can't do. It's whatever you're comfortable with, looking at the aim that you're trying to explain to a potential investor or your manager, boss, owner of the company, why they should fund you to build this product. What is in the Canva item? What does it do? What problem does it solve? Why is it different to everything else that's already out there on the market? I think that's about it. So it is sort of a sales pitch, but it's a technical sales pitch.
And further to that, someone, Kaio, is asking, does it need to have a video of yourself in himself in the video, or can it just be a presentation and a voice?
Completely up to you. If you don't want to appear in the video, there is no problem if you don't. But we do want, where possible, you talking, because it's to try and build your skills in the oral presentation of your idea. So it's really based around giving you the confidence and experience in pitching an idea to finances or management. But do it in whatever way you feel comfortable with. If you don't want to be in it, don't be in it. But we do need you talking not just a set of typed notes. Of course, there's a reason you can't do that, then just let us know.
And a further question regarding the length of the video. We've given a 5 to 10 minutes guide, but I'd imagine if it's a little bit either side of that, it wouldn't be penalised. It's just that you need to think about that amount of content. Would that be right?
Yeah, the reason we've put limits on it is that's the way industry actually works. If you're given an opportunity to present to the board or to venture capitalists or to other people, they will say, you've got 5 minutes to give us your idea. And when your 5 minutes is up, they'll go, that's it, go away. You need to ensure that you cover absolutely everything you need to cover. You don't waffle on and take up too much time, and you finish on time. We've been very generous in the variance there with 5 to 10 minutes. That's not something you would normally find in a real situation. You will have your 5 minutes and that's it, you're finished. So it really is to make you think about what you want to communicate, how you're going to communicate it in the most efficient manner, and ensuring that you cover all of the important parts in that time limit.
Okay, no other questions I can see at the moment that anyone has.
What do we have from this morning that was interesting that came out? Oh, if you're interested in dealing with speech recognition or speech output, I showed a small shield that fits directly on the Arduino that's relatively inexpensive. Do you still have the link there, Savash? The Mobi shield?
Yeah, I'll just
pop it in the chat there. And this is a really affordable way to get your IoT devices to talk or obey commands via speech without having internet access or relying on cloud processing. And this can be really important in places where the loss of your internet connection will cause a system to fail. So if we look at health industry, where we have people with severe motor disability who rely on voice commands to activate things within their environment, open the front door, bed, direct their wheelchair. If the internet connectivity disappears, they are completely helpless. So we need a backup or a reliable system that will work without reliance on external factors. And this is the kind of thing we would build in. Use local rather than cloud processing for safety issues. And that's a nice little device. It works really well as speaker-independent recognition for a very limited vocabulary. I can't remember off the top of my head how many words. But for speaker independent, it's usually a limited vocabulary.
Nair is adding regarding the videos, the referenced videos provided in the course material on edX are, she's saying they're useful to anyone who is wanting any advice on preparing their presentation, and I'd certainly agree with that. They're there for any guide towards building your creating your own. There's also a question from James. Should the pricing strategy for the report take into account sales, costs, etc. over the full life cycle of the product, or should it reflect annual numbers? You
should include everything that you can think of if it's significant. So the things I'd be looking at are, once you've got your R&D costs, you've got your material costs, they're the obvious ones. But how are you going to get it to the customer? Are you going to charge them for it? Is it going to have to be stocked somewhere? Because keeping stock is really, really expensive. If you're going to be wholesaling, what margin are you going to give to the retailers? What number are you going to put on the cost of warranty, repairs and returns? So there is an awful lot to it if you start going to that level. Major things, but if you think, say, return costs are going to be minimal, then maybe you just neglect that particular aspect. But things like warranty can get very expensive, so it's worth building something in for that. And then you've got your future planning as well. So if you intend to get this out to market and then do a continuous improvement process on it, it's got to be paid for somehow, and that will come directly out of your profit. So it's always good to think, right, here's my first iteration. I'm going to spend 3 months full-time creating the next iteration of the device. That's going to cost me $100,000. So you have to incorporate that within your profit margin so you have the cash ready to do the next development. And these are the things we'll be looking for. How deeply did people look at the basic guidelines that we've given?
Okay, I can't see any other questions, but if anyone has a question or a comment, a general discussion, now is a good time. Oh, no, Yuri, people in the US are obliged to pay tax to their government to get funding, so US citizens should take that into consideration within the cost. Yet, similar to what Ian mentioned before, different countries.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and we only just touched on it. But it comes under that political economic environment. In some countries, there's very little regulation or very little taxation on business profits, but in other countries, it can be a quite significant a cost to the business. It certainly is in Australia. It's not just the sales tax. We've got payroll tax. We've got profit tax. We've got lots and lots of taxes.
And in the chat window as well, Kaio sharing the name of his device, Banken, if I'm pronouncing that right, or Banken. It means watchdog in Japanese for his surveillance system for farmers.
Oh, that sounds good. That's a nice local flavour to it as well. So, again, will help with your marketing plan. If you've got a catchy name, if iPhones weren't called iPhones and they were called touchscreen mobile communication devices, probably no one would have bought them. So it actually does have quite an impact on your marketing and the appeal to other people. Think of the amount of thought that goes into car names, so they sound like the market they're trying to get into. So they're an aggressive name if it's a sports car, or they're a passive, relaxing name if they're a luxury car. And it really can have quite an impact on market penetration and defining the market you're aiming for. Everyone's happy with their programming so far? Had a look at sensors and what sort of sensors you're going to be using? Actually, just going back to that question we had on this morning on unique. I'll just show something that's kind of similar. There we go. I'll just bring that up. The reason things don't have to be unique, particularly in cases like this, this is a list of the honours students we're supervising currently at. And if we look down the list, you'll see there's some that are actually very, very similar, such as there's an agriculture probe, there's two on this guide dog smart harness. So these are the same ideas that people are approaching from very, very different aspects. Look at the different approaches people take, different emphasis they put on aspects of the project. So in the case of this guide dog one, it's a smart harness for a guide dog to look after its health. See if the dog's limping, what temperature the dog is, its breathing and heart rate. But we also use it for remote training of guide dogs. So the person using a guide dog can be at some remote location and have the trainer sitting in Perth, and they can train the guide dog. And these two projects are doing very similar things, but they're approaching them very, very differently. They're using different sets of sensors, they're using a different communication method. One of them's looking at the long-term training of a machine learning algorithm to look at how the dog is performing, to see if it's aging, to see if it's developing problems. And the other one is looking at more immediate problems. So there's no drama with having a project that is very, very similar to someone else's, because everyone does things differently. But working closely with those people is also very, very useful.
We have a question or comment from Anthony. Hello, Anthony.
Thanks, Josh. Ian, the market research analysis PDF that you've been showing, those categories are fairly high level. Is that the level of detail you're expecting, or do you want to see the working that goes into them as well?
It should be fairly high level at this point, because as you start to refine your design, some of the aspects will change. Do you have a particular example, or?
I was looking at the forecast cost there, just a single number, whereas a lot of us will put a fair bit of detail on that, I imagine.
Yes, and at the prototyping stage, that can be difficult to come up with. That's always a bit of a guess. If you do everything right, you'll exceed it. If you do a few things wrong, it'll fall short. So, it's good if you justify how you came up with that number. And I really would like to see that from people. So, if you're doing any forecasts along those lines, it's probably fairly important that you justify how you came up with that number, and that actually comes from probably the competitor analysis as well. So if you know that your competitor is selling at 10 times your price, you know you can actually mark it up higher, so your revenue will be higher. Whereas if your price is coming in close to theirs, your revenue may be lower depending on the competition.
Okay, makes sense. When were you releasing this PDF for us to access?
It should already be up.
No, I believe
only just
week 7 content.
Is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, just from what I can see in edX, I was just asked the same question on the chat. Market research and costing template as part of week 7.
So that'll be next week.
Okay.
Yes, next week. After they won't be able to see it just yet.
Ah, okay. I thought it was already there, but next week. But then you've got 2 weeks to get it done. So.
So James asks, can we focus on one country only as a target market, or should we rather consider multiple countries in our research?
It's always best to start small, far less risk, and looking at your local market is usually better, not always. So I would say yes, I would, unless you think you have the channels to get it to a global market, and very importantly, you have the resources to meet that market. It really depends on those factors. There's nothing worse than getting thousands of orders in and having no way to fulfill them. Remember that in manufacturing, and I actually have a background in manufacturing many years ago, but it was still in manufacture. When you receive an order, you've got to pay the wages, the material costs, overheads for building and electricity, which may take you may have to cover a month, maybe 2 months while you're actually building the products. Then you ship them out, and everybody then takes between 1 and 3 months to pay you. So you're looking at having to cover the cost for all of your production for up to 6 months before you start getting any money back in. If you have small orders and you're doing things on a small scale, that's less money that you have to come up with initially. If you try and open up to the entire world market, you have to somehow finance the production of those devices and still not get your money for 3 to 6 months. So starting slowly is usually a very good idea if you have limited resources to finance your operation.
Okay, no other questions. There's just one arrived now from Kaio. So talking about sensors that he targets up to this point: microwave motion sensors, PIR sensors, sound, microphones, that is. Most of the idea is to catch different types of wild animals in the region that he's looking. Now there are boars and reports of snakes, so it would be a good idea to get as well, he says. Snake sensors and boars.
Yeah, well, you need to know what wildlife is in the area, what you're actually looking for. You're very interested to see how you're going to detect snakes. It would be really useful in Australia. But can you let us know how you would capture snakes? Boars, maybe. Really, are you looking at capturing a sound and then classifying a sound to belong to a boar or to a lion or to snake or whatever it happens to be?
He'll be typing, I'd say. I was just wondering with snakes whether there's a particular odour given off by certain types of snakes that you could detect or in the area, or maybe rattlesnakes rattle in those.
Yeah, the trouble is with any audio classification problem, it's harder than it sounds, no pun intended. We've looked at classifying sounds, speech and other things, particularly vehicle sounds for alerting hearing impaired drivers that someone's blasting a horn or there's a siren. And it's much more complex than you would think to classify computers to understand what a sound is. It's not impossible by any means, but it is difficult.
Right. There's no other questions at this stage, but now is the time if anyone would like.
It might be very much or a lot easier to use image capture and machine learning to classify the animals and use sound as a way to trigger the image capture. I've got a student working on this semester actually identifying sharks. So flying a drone over the beach and trying to look for sharks. That's quite interesting. Okay. I'll sit here for a little while longer in case anyone has a question. If you have anything that you're not keen on speaking in public, hang around until the end and let me know. And I'll stay on and we can have a private chat for 5 minutes or so.
No, he just wants to take the chance to thank Siavash and Ian for cooperation and support for her project.
That's
a comment.
Perfectly all right. That's what we're here for. Okay, well, if nobody's got anything else, as I said, I'll hang around for the next 10 minutes. But that'll do us for tonight. If you do have any questions or they come to mind later, don't forget you can always email us. And if it's something a little bit more complex and can be covered in email, I'll let you know how to Skype me and we can have a chat. Had a few do that. Had a really good conversation with one of the students this morning. That was interesting. Yeah, Andy, you're there. Hopefully got something from that. But more than happy to have a chat as time allows if it's something that can't be solved via email.
There is a question from Mazin on the chat window asking, what if the market I am planning to target and do my market and research report in has no manufacturing capabilities that would help in manufacturing my IoT idea?
Okay, in that case, you would have to set up the manufacturing yourself. And unfortunately, I don't have all the gear here I've got in my office. But I could show you at some point the way you can prototype small runs of devices very, very cheaply using 3D printing, CNC machines, and that includes PCB manufacture. So as long as you're not looking at huge numbers, you can actually produce this in like a cottage industry. How many devices are you talking about? What do you think the market demand is for the devices? Because really, if you're using 3D printing, I'll wait for while you type in. If you're using 3D printing, it's incredibly cheap items, but it is also incredibly slow. You're looking at hours for fairly small devices. So if I was to print this lollipop, it's only small, but it would probably take an hour or two to print that at a reasonable quality. So it's very slow, but the material cost would be less than a cent. And the machines are cheap too, relatively. Did we get a number?
Can't see anything yet. He says, thanks. Mazen, did you catch that? Ian was just asking on what kind of quantities you'd be talking about of the product.
Yeah, it really depends on, how long is it going to take to manufacture one. If you're doing it on a very small scale, how much are you actually going to sell it for? The cost would be fairly high because of that labour cost. But again, it's nice thing about 3D printing is you can set things off printing and walk away, and most of the time, not all the time, they'll actually turn out okay.
He's referring to the stomach ingestible sensor.
Okay. So at this point, I would say you'll be prototyping in an artificial stomach, a simulated stomach, which means you could produce a prototype that may not be suitable for ingestion. Once you get to that point, it's a case of chasing down the people who would produce ingestible devices. Most of those would be in Europe or the US. And you'd have to enter an agreement with them for the actual manufacture. Your case is somewhat different, that it's not something you can produce at home. You would have a very, very long regulatory process to go through to get it approved for human use. And that would include animal trials as well. So I would think that an individual probably would never get to the point of manufacturing this for consumer use, the point where you can sell it to somebody who would be in a position to manufacture it, because those costs, the regulation costs and meeting the regulations, would be formidable and probably not achievable for an individual unless they're extremely wealthy. But that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. It's definitely worth doing and worth looking at, because your idea can be purchased by somebody who has those resources.
All right, we've got a few questions coming in the chat window now. So Vijay Kumar asks, can an IoT use case be patented?
That's a good question. I wouldn't think under some circumstances, but I'll take that under advisement. I'll try and find out for you and let you know. I should ask my lawyer daughter. Yeah, I'll try and find out for you. I'm not absolutely certain on that.
And are there plastic 3D printing that will survive well outside in the Australian sun, for example?
Yes, as well as any plastic will. There are UV stabilised ABS materials. They're fairly stock standard. It's the same as most computers are made out of. This old mouse would be ABS. It's reasonably rugged. It does become brittle after time. Most of the car dashboards and that are made out of ABS. But there are better ones as well. So there's a lot of nylons that you can use for 3D printing that are much more robust. So yeah, an answer to that, yes, but pick the material carefully. PLA certainly not. That becomes very brittle in a short period of time. You can get polycarbonate, which is great unless it gets solvent on it, then it fractures. So look into the materials for what application you're after, and in most cases there is something suitable. One of the things I showed this morning was a synthetic rubber that we 3D printed to make tooth belts for a braille embosser, and that is chemical resistant. It's flexible, so we can make a belt out of it, and that's just a case of chasing down the right sort of materials.
And Sudhir says, what is the best way to design for prototype for 3D printing? Design a prototype for 3D printing? Well,
there's lots of different ways. We use SketchUp to do the 3D drawing, and then it's just a set of open source packages to slice it into layers and send it off to the printer. And it's a fairly standard format, .stl format, and most 3D printers will accept that. But SketchUp's a good free program to do it. If you've got resources or you're doing it at work, SolidWorks is another good one, very, very expensive. And 3D scanning is also a very handy one as well. So you can get your initial image by 3D scanning. And that is surprisingly cheap nowadays. We use one. I'll grab the website for it. And from memory, it's now down around $300 US for this. You need an iPad or Android device to use it, but get typing everything wrong. And just share my screen again. Yes. Okay, so this is the scanner sitting here, and that will produce a 3D model of whatever you decide to scan, accurate to 0.1 millimeter at 300 millimeters. Just hooks onto a iPad or even an iPhone, in fact, and it will give you the basis for something you can then put into SolidWorks, SketchUp, Mesh. What's the one called? It's one called Mesh something that will allow you to then edit the object. MeshLab will allow you to edit the object and then send it off to a 3D printer. There we go. So that's the sort of thing it does.
Just to add to that, Tinkercad, its original purpose before I added the circuit feature was actually for 3D design. So you can use it for that kind of purpose. I'm not sure. I haven't actually tried it myself. I'm not sure how it translates to 3D printing. But
bear with me a second. I'll see if I can just grab something that's a really good example of scaling and printing.
Yes, when you do log into Tinkercad, it's the function there is the 3D design side of things.
No, unfortunately not. But I scanned my daughter and then 3D printed it, and it came out rather nice actually. The stature of my daughter was big. You have any questions while I was away?
They were just confirming that it was SketchUp that you mentioned.
SketchUp, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's see if I've still got it here. Here we go, I shall. Just share that again. No, I'll tell you that to me. I won't go through it, but there it is there, SketchUp. Printing in millimeters.
And Kyo mentions Fusion 360 also for 3D printing.
Yeah. And there it is there, and we can add surfaces in, etc. Fairly straightforward to use. There's lots of online utilities for it. The other one we have is MeshLab. I'm just wondering if I had a mesh. MeshLab is good for editing rather than actually creating things. Let's see if I've got something there. My computer's going really slow. There we go. What have we got?
So now it's asking, is SketchUp good for a beginner level?
Yes.
As well? Yes, it is.
Yeah, definitely for beginner levels. I can't find a file. Let me grab an STL file and I'll just open it. There we go. Yeah, what's a nice one? That was a really simple one I've just pulled up, but this is a pin from one of the projects we were doing, and it's in MeshLab, and we can actually change the format. So this is just the points that are involved, and we can see the surfaces it's created, and we can actually edit these and move them about if you want to correct an existing STL file. Back to there. There we go.
And Anthony's confirming that Tinkercad's 3D function is really easy and export to STL files. So
yeah, most programs do. But I use this for actually editing things. It's interesting.
I think there was the trophy file somewhere.
So we'll put these together. But yeah, there's one of our very early inertial measurement unit boxes as well. So the Lego case that we made for it. So this is an IMU that we designed for children, and that's the lid of it. That was designed in SketchUp, and we made it look like a Lego block, so it wasn't threatening to the children. We were sticking these all over. They just looked like Lego monsters. But they're good fun, and the printers themselves are relatively cheap. I'd be careful getting one of the very, very cheap ones because they tend not to work very well. Things like having a heated bed is important, otherwise you get warping, and then look at the accuracy of them. But you can get them for $500 US that are reasonably good ones. Okay, I think we're all good for tonight. As I said, if you've got anything, let us know. We'll be happy to help. Email is the best option first up. If you don't get an answer within 2 working days, send it again to bring it back up to the top of our list because we do get lots and lots of emails. All right, thank you everyone. Good night. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.